Humans. Ha! What a joke. I, Commander Krell of the Valkarian Elite Guard, stood at the viewport of our diplomatic vessel as Earth came into view. The blue-green marble looked pathetically small from space. Much like its inhabitants. "Commander, we'll be landing in 30 minutes, my second-in-command, Thrag, reported with a salute that made his armor plates clank together in that satisfying way. "Wonderful," I replied, my mandibles clicking with undisguised sarcasm. Another chance to pretend these tiny creatures are worth our time. The ship hummed around us, vibrating with the controlled power of Valkarian technology. We'd spent 3 years fighting these humans before someone with actual brains realized we'd be better off as allies. Now here I was, an 8-foot, 400-pound elite warrior, being sent to play nice with bipeds barely reaching my chest plate. "You know, Commander," Thrag dared to comment, "they did manage to hold off our southern battalion at the Battle of New Singapore." I swiveled my head, all 4 eyes narrowing at him. "Through underhanded tactics and sheer dumb luck. Not skill." "Of course, Commander." Thrag backed away, knowing better than to challenge my assessment further. The truth? The humans had surprised us. Several times, actually. But I wasn't about to admit that out loud. Not when I'd been sent on this ridiculous diplomatic mission against my will. "What's the primary objective again?" I asked, even though I knew. I just wanted to hear how stupid it sounded one more time. "We're to establish a combat integration program, Commander. The High Council believes that by learning to fight alongside humans, we can bond with them." Thrag could barely keep a straight face as he said the word bond. I laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made the nearby junior officers flinch. "Bond. With humans. Right." The ship began its descent procedures, the hull creaking slightly as we entered Earth's atmosphere. Out the viewport, clouds parted to reveal sprawling cities and vast oceans. Hard to believe these primitives had managed to build anything worth looking at. "Commander, incoming transmission from Earth Command," called our communications officer. "Put it through," I grunted, straightening my ceremonial armor. "Time to play diplomat." A human face appeared on screen. Tiny nose, fragile-looking jaw, and those weird flat teeth. Disgusting. "Commander Krell, welcome to Earth. We're honored by your presence and look forward to this historic opportunity for our species to work together." I forced my mandibles into what passed for a pleasant expression among my kind. "The honor," I lied through my teeth, "is all mine." Our ship touched down with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. I mean, Valkarian ships aren't exactly known for their graceful landings. The humans had cleared a massive landing area at their so-called Global Defense Headquarters, which was really just a collection of uninspiring rectangular buildings. Pathetic, considering we Valkarians carve our military facilities directly into mountain ranges. "Remember," I growled to my team as the landing ramp lowered, "we're here to look intimidating but not threatening." There's apparently a difference. A welcoming committee waited below. I counted 12 humans in crisp military uniforms, standing at attention with faces that tried, and failed, to hide their terror. The scent of their fear hit my olfactory sensors before I'd even reached the bottom of the ramp. Sweet, tangy, and absolutely delicious. Commander Krell, a human male, stepped forward. His name badge read General Blackwood. He extended his hand, a gesture I'd been briefed about, though I still found it bizarre. "Welcome to Earth Defense Headquarters." I engulfed his tiny hand in my massive clawed one, watching with amusement as he fought not to wince. "General. Your hospitality is unexpected." Behind Blackwood, a female human with short red hair was staring at me with such intensity one half expected my armor to melt. Unlike the others, she didn't reek of fear. "Curious. Let me show you to the diplomatic wing," Blackwood said, turning so quickly I wondered if he thought I might eat him if he presented his back too long. Not entirely wrong. I was getting hungry. As we walked through their facility, humans scattered like water droplets on a hot plate. Some tried to appear casual about it, while others openly pressed themselves against walls to avoid coming within 5 feet of my party. Thrag chuckled behind me, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Your people seem comfortable with our presence, I remarked dryly to Blackwood. It's the first time most of them have seen a Valkarian up close, he stammered. The war was mostly fought by remote units and in space. How convenient, I said, letting my mandibles click rapidly, the Valkarian equivalent of an eye roll. We arrived at a large conference room where more humans waited. A holographic display showed what appeared to be a training facility. Commander Krell, a new human, spoke, a dark-skinned woman with commander insignia. I'm Commander Wu. I'll be overseeing the combat integration program. Combat integration? I repeated, though I'd been briefed extensively. You mean you want your fragile little soldiers to train alongside Valkarian warriors? That's ambitious. Commander Wu didn't flinch. The program pairs one human with one Valkarian in extensive combat exercises designed to leverage the strengths of both species. And how many brave humans have volunteered for this suicide mission? I asked, not bothering to hide my skepticism. We have one volunteer, Wu replied evenly. Lieutenant Nora Rodriguez. The red-haired human I'd noticed earlier stepped forward. Up close, I realized she was tiny even by human standards, barely reaching the middle of my torso. Yet she met my gaze without wavering. And who, I asked, already dreading the answer, will be paired with this? Lieutenant Rodriguez? Wu smiled, a gesture I'd come to recognize as either diplomacy or sadism. That would be you, Commander. The room went silent. I could hear my own heart's beating in my chest cavity. Of course it would, I said, mandibles clenched tight. How? Perfect. After the meeting, I was led to what humans call a gym. A peculiar word for such a primitive training facility. The room contained various weighted objects and strange contraptions that looked like medieval torture devices. Lieutenant Rodriguez was already there, wearing what appeared to be purposefully tight-fitting exercise garments. Humans and their bizarre fashion choices. Commander Krell, she said, offering her laughably small hand. It's an honor to meet you properly. I stared at her hand, then at her face. You volunteered for this? I did. No hesitation in her voice. Why? I demanded, ignoring her outstretched hand until she awkwardly withdrew it. Rodriguez shrugged, that irritating human gesture that can mean anything from indifference to profound philosophical contemplation. Someone had to do it, and I've studied Valkarian combat techniques extensively. Plus, I figured better me than some muscle-bound idiot who thinks size is everything. I blinked all 4 of my eyes slowly, which among my kind signifies either deep thought or mounting rage. In this case, both. You realize I could snap your spine with one hand? Without even trying particularly hard? She grinned. Actually grinned. Good thing you won't be trying then, right? This is about cooperation, not squishing your partner. Thrag, who'd been standing silently by the door, made a choking sound that he poorly disguised as a cough. Your confidence is. I searched for the right word, misplaced, Lieutenant Rodriguez. Call me Nora, she replied, then did something completely unexpected. She reached out and lightly tapped my armor. And your assessment is premature, Commander. I looked down at where her tiny finger had touched my ceremonial breastplate. Did you just poke me? Figured we should get past the whole "don't touch the alien" thing right away. She picked up what appeared to be a combat staff from a nearby rack. Ready to see what humans can do? I looked over at Thrag, who shrugged in a way that suggested I was on my own with this lunatic. Turning back to Lieutenant Rodriguez, Nora, I saw no fear in her eyes. No hesitation. Not even a hint of self-preservation instinct. Instead, I saw something I rarely encountered even among my own kind, pure, unflinching determination. You really aren't afraid, are you? I asked, genuinely perplexed. She twirled the staff with surprising dexterity. I respect what you're capable of, Commander. That's different from fear. Most of your kind can barely look at us without trembling. Yeah, well, she flashed that unsettling grin again. I'm not most humans. I found myself unexpectedly intrigued by this tiny, fearless creature. Either she was the bravest human alive or the most foolish. Possibly both. Either way, this bonding process might be marginally less tedious than I'd anticipated. Very well, Lieutenant Not Most Humans, I said, selecting a staff that looked comically small in my giant hands. Show me this supposed human combat prowess. Try not to die in the first 5 minutes. Try not to be embarrassed when I'm still standing after 10, she shot back, the audacity. The sheer, mind-boggling audacity. Our first official training session began at what humans call 0600. An absurd time system. Just count the rotations like normal species do. I arrived to find Nora already warming up, performing stretches that made her look like she was trying to turn herself into a pretzel. Humans are disturbingly flexible, with joints that bend in ways that would snap a Valkarian's exoskeleton. Good morning, Commander, she chirped. Yes, chirped, like some kind of deranged morning bird. Ready to get started? I growled in response. Valkarians are not morning people. We're not afternoon people either. Or evening people. We're generally not people. The first exercise, I rumbled, consulting the datapad containing our training schedule, is called Trust Falls. What ridiculous human nonsense is this? Nora laughed. It's simple. I stand with my back to you, fall backward, and you catch me. I stared at her. That's it? That's combat training on Earth? It's team building, Commander. Before we fight together, we need to trust each other. I don't need to trust you, I said flatly. I just need you to not get in my way while I exterminate our enemies. She crossed her arms. Humor me. With exaggerated reluctance, I positioned myself behind her. She stood with her back to me, arms crossed over her chest. Ready? She asked. For this absurdity? I suppose. She fell backward. I caught her with one hand, her entire weight barely registering against my strength. She felt bizarrely fragile, like catching a falling leaf. Good, she said, bouncing back to her feet. Now your turn. I laughed so hard my mandibles nearly locked up. You want me to fall backward and expect you to catch me? That's how it works, she said, entirely serious. I weigh 400 pounds in your Earth measurements. I know physics, Commander. I don't need to match your weight, I just need to counter your momentum. Still chuckling, I turned my back to her. When I crush you like a, ready, she interrupted. This is Riddick, falling now. I let myself tip backward slightly, not actually intending to fall, but she shoved hard against my back plates with her feet while pulling at my shoulders. The combination of leverage points redirected my mass sideways instead of backward, and I found myself stumbling to regain balance rather than falling on her. What was that? I demanded, spinning around. Adaptive problem solving, she said, grinning. I never said I'd catch you the same way you caught me. Something entirely unfamiliar happened then. I found myself respecting a human. The next few hours were filled with similar surprises. During weapons training, she couldn't match my strength, but her speed was remarkable. She darted around me like an annoying insect, landing strikes in joints and weak points that would have been debilitating in actual combat. During the tactical simulation, she suggested approaches that I dismissed as absurd, only to find they worked disturbingly well. Humans, it seemed, excelled at thinking around problems rather than through them. The cultural misunderstandings were endless. When I told her she fought like a hatchling with 3 limbs, she took it as an insult rather than the high praise it was meant to be. Hatchlings are our most vicious fighters, and then there was the water incident. You need to hydrate, she said, tossing me a container of clear liquid. I caught it, unscrewed the cap, and poured it over my head plates as is proper for Valkarian hydration. Nora's expression was priceless. That's not how we drink water on Earth. You drink it? I asked, genuinely horrified. You put the cleaning liquid inside your body? After she finished laughing, which took an inappropriately long time, she explained that humans consumed water internally rather than using it for external cooling. Barbarians. By day's end, I found myself not hating her company. When she successfully executed a complex Valkarian defensive maneuver that had taken me weeks to master as a cadet, I grudgingly acknowledged her skill. You're less terrible than I expected, I admitted as we concluded the session. Nora wiped sweat from her brow. From you, Commander, I'll take that as a glowing endorsement. Don't push it, tiny human. Wouldn't dream of it, giant lizard man. I narrowed all 4 eyes at her. I am not a lizard. She winked. And I'm not tiny. I'm fun-sized. 2 weeks into our bonding program, the novelty had worn off. I'd grown accustomed to Nora's incessant questions, bizarre human idioms, and frustrating ability to exploit weaknesses in my fighting style that no one had ever identified before. We had reached what she called a working relationship, which apparently meant I only contemplated squashing her once or twice a day instead of hourly. We were scheduled to demonstrate our progress to the joint military leadership, a glorified dog and pony show, as Nora called it. Whatever that meant. Do humans actually make dogs mate with ponies for entertainment? Wouldn't surprise me. You seem tense, Nora observed as we prepared in the equipment room, strapping on our demonstration gear. I don't get tense, I lied, adjusting my ceremonial shoulder guards. Valkarians don't experience pre-performance anxiety. Right, she said, giving me that look humans use when they know you're full of excrement but are too polite to say so. And I don't experience hunger. Ever. Completely unfamiliar with the sensation. As if on cue, her stomach made a gurgling noise. Your digestive system disagrees, I pointed out. She laughed, then tossed me my combat staff. Remember the sequence we practiced? No improvising like yesterday. I'd prefer not to have a concussion when meeting the top brass. I caught the staff with one hand. That was hardly my fault. You zigged when you should have zagged. I zagged exactly when. She stopped suddenly, her head tilting in that peculiar way humans do when they're focusing on something. Do you smell that? I inhaled deeply, my olfactory sensors picking up something wrong. Something chemical and harsh. Yes. It's not a standard compound used in this facility. Nora moved toward the ventilation shaft, standing on a bench to get closer. Something's not right. This smells like. The explosion wasn't particularly large, but it was precisely targeted. The ventilation grate blew outward, spraying the room with shrapnel and releasing a cloud of dense, purple gas that I recognized immediately. Nerve agent. I shouted, already feeling my limbs growing heavy. Tailored for Valkarian biology. Nora's eyes widened. She was already holding her breath, I realized. Smart human. The gas likely wouldn't affect her species, it was clearly designed specifically to target my kind. My vision blurred as the neurotoxin began shutting down my motor functions. I stumbled, crashing into equipment racks and sending weapons clattering to the floor. Through the haze, I saw Nora scrambling for something in her locker. Anti-dote. I managed to rasp, my mandibles barely able to form words as paralysis set in. Valkarian. Medical. But the medical wing was on the other side of the compound. I'd be brain dead before she could get there and back. My massive body hit the floor with a thud that probably registered on their primitive seismic detectors. The last thing I saw before my secondary eyelids involuntarily closed was Nora running toward me with something in her hand. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the sensation of something cold against my neck scales. Then, the sound of alarms blaring. Finally, the sight of Nora's face hovering above mine, streaked with sweat and what appeared to be my own hemolymph. "Don't move yet," she ordered, as if I could. "I had to improvise an antidote injection directly into your secondary circulatory system." I tried to speak, but my voice modulator was still rebooting. "Emergency response is on the way," she continued, her hands, I now realized, were pressing something against my neck. "Had to use your combat knife to access the right blood vessel. Sorry about that. I've studied Valkarian anatomy. Figured hitting your backup heart system was the fastest way to counteract the toxin." My voice finally engaged. "You stabbed me in the neck?" She gave a breathless laugh. "You're welcome. The neurotoxin was designed to shut down your primary systems. I mixed the universal antidote with adrenaline and bypassed directly to your secondary systems." Basic field medicine. Basic field medicine, I repeated incredulously. "You call emergency vascular surgery with a combat knife basic?" Security forces burst into the room, weapons drawn, led by Thrag and Commander Wu. "Secure the ventilation system," Nora shouted. This was sabotage, targeted specifically at Valkarian physiology. As they swept the room, I found myself staring at this tiny human who had just saved my life through quick thinking, improvised surgery, and apparently extensive knowledge of Valkarian biology that even I wasn't fully versed in. "How did you know that would work?" I asked quietly. "I didn't," she admitted. "But doing nothing definitely wouldn't work." Such simple logic. Such reckless courage, such a very human approach to problem solving. "The sabotage was orchestrated by the Crimson Dawn," Commander Wu explained during the emergency briefing. "A terrorist group opposed to human-alien cooperation." I'd recovered enough to stand, though my neck still throbbed where Nora had performed her basic field medicine. Thrag kept shooting me concerned glances, probably wondering how I'd allowed myself to be stabbed by a human half my size. "Intelligence suggests they've established a base in the northern wilderness," General Blackwood continued, pointing to a holographic map. "They've acquired experimental weapons technology that poses a threat to both our species." "So send a strike team," I said, mandibles clicking impatiently. "Preferably one with extensive explosives training." Blackwood and Wu exchanged glances. One of those meaningful human looks that said volumes without words. "Annoying. We believe this is an opportunity," Wu said carefully, "to demonstrate the effectiveness of our joint combat program." I stared at her. "You want to send me, us, after them? A two-person team against a terrorist cell?" "A surgical strike," Nora chimed in, studying the holographic layout. "Small team, high mobility, one Valkarian, one human. We could infiltrate while they're expecting a conventional assault force." I turned all four eyes toward her. "You nearly died, I nearly died, a few hours ago, and you want to rush headlong into their stronghold?" She met my gaze without flinching. "That's exactly why we should go. They targeted you specifically, Commander. This is personal now." Personal. What a curiously human concept. Yet I couldn't deny the burning sensation in my tertiary gut sac that felt suspiciously like what humans might call wanting revenge. 6 hours later, we were dropping from a stealth transport into the dense forest 5 kilometers from the Crimson Dawn's compound. The night was moonless, perfect for a surprise attack. Nora was equipped with her standard gear plus several items of Valkarian technology we determined she could effectively utilize. "Remember," I whispered as we moved through the underbrush, "follow my lead and stay in your shadow," she finished. "I know the plan, Commander." "The plan keeps you alive, Lieutenant." "The plan keeps us both alive," she corrected. "Partnership, remember?" I grunted but didn't argue further. We fell into silence as we approached the perimeter sensors. According to our intelligence, the security system had been designed to detect both human and Valkarian biosignatures, but not simultaneously, because who would be crazy enough to send a mixed-species team? We triggered the sensors deliberately, setting off alarms that registered a Valkarian approach from the east. As predicted, their security forces mobilized in that direction, away from our actual position to the west. Humans weren't the only ones who could think around problems. The infiltration went smoothly until we reached the central chamber. The experimental weapon, a gravity manipulation device that could selectively crush targets based on their molecular density, was bigger than our intelligence had suggested. And far more operational. "That's not a prototype," Nora whispered. "That's ready for deployment." Before I could respond, spotlights flooded the chamber. A voice boomed from overhead speakers. "Welcome, Commander Krell. And your pet human, of course." Guards poured in, surrounding us with weapons drawn. At their center stood a human male with a scarred face and cold eyes. "Commander Trent Marcus," Nora spat. "Dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for advocating genocide against non-human species." "Lieutenant Rodriguez," Marcus replied with a mocking bow. "The traitor who chose alien monsters over her own kind." I stepped forward, inserting my bulk protectively between Nora and the weapons pointed our way. "Your quarrel is with interspecies cooperation, not with her." "My quarrel," Marcus snarled, "is with the pollution of humanity's destiny. We should be conquering the stars, not making friends with overgrown insects." While he monologued, "Why do the deranged ones always monologue?" I noticed Nora had slowly detached something from her belt. Our eyes met briefly, and she made a subtle hand gesture we developed during training. "Distraction needed." I laughed, the sound echoing dramatically through the chamber. "Conquering the stars? You primitives barely made it to your own moon without nearly killing yourselves." As Marcus's face contorted with rage, Nora moved with blinding speed, throwing a Valkarian flash grenade. In the moment of blindness and confusion, we launched our attack. What followed was perhaps the most perfectly coordinated combat I've ever experienced. Without words, without signals, we moved as a single unit. Where I provided strength and devastating forward assaults, Nora slipped through gaps to disable key targets. When I drew fire, she eliminated gunners. When she needed extraction from a tight spot, my arm was already there to pull her to safety. In 3 minutes, 15 armed terrorists were neutralized. Only Marcus remained, backing toward the weapon controls. "You think this changes anything?" he shouted, fingers flying over the console. "I'll crush you both into atoms." The machine hummed to life, targeting beams sweeping toward us. Nora pushed me aside, literally pushed me, a Valkarian war commander, and sprinted toward Marcus. "Nora!" I bellowed, certain I was about to watch her disintegration. The gravity beam caught her mid-leap, suspending her in air as the crushing force began to build. But instead of panicking, she turned toward me, her face strained but determined. "Throw your knife," she gasped through the increasing pressure. Understanding flashed between us. I hurled my ceremonial dagger with perfect precision. The blade sailed through the air, passing through the gravity field, which was calibrated for organic matter, not metal, and directly into the control panel. The machine sparked and sputtered. The gravity field collapsed, dropping Nora. I lunged forward, catching her before she hit the ground. Marcus, desperate, drew a sidearm. Without hesitation, I spun, still holding Nora, and she used the momentum to fire her weapon over my shoulder, hitting Marcus squarely in the chest. He crumpled. The silence that followed was profound. "We," Nora said, still cradled in my arms and breathing heavily, "are a really good team." I looked down at this fragile, brilliant, impossibly brave human and felt something I'd never expected: complete trust. "Yes," I agreed. "We are." 1 month after the Crimson Dawn incident, I stood before the Valkarian High Council in the Grand Chamber of our mothership. My ceremonial armor gleamed under the pale blue lights, freshly polished for this historic occasion. Beside me, looking absurdly small among the towering Valkarian officials, stood Lieutenant Nora Rodriguez, wearing her formal Earth military uniform. Commander Krell, intoned Supreme Leader Vorkath, his ancient mandibles barely moving as he spoke. "You were sent to Earth to evaluate the potential of humans as combat allies. We require your assessment." All 4 of my eyes focused steadily on the council. 6 months ago, I would have dismissed humans as barely worth the oxygen they consumed. Now, "Supreme Leader, esteemed council members," I began, my voice resonating through the chamber. "I stand before you today to advocate not merely for a military alliance with humans, but for comprehensive integration of our forces." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Thrag, standing at attention nearby, couldn't hide his mandible twitch of surprise. "Elaborate," commanded Vorkath. "The human species possesses qualities our own lacks," I continued. "Where we bring strength, they bring adaptability. Where we bring tactical orthodoxy, they bring creative improvisation. Where we bring overwhelming force." I glanced down at Nora. "They bring surprising efficiency." I activated a holographic display showing footage from our mission, moments where Nora's smaller size allowed her to access areas I couldn't, instances where her unconventional thinking solved problems my traditional approach would have missed. Most critically, I added, they possess a quality rarely seen among our kind: the ability to form functional partnerships across seemingly insurmountable differences. Vorkath leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Nora. "This single human is your evidence?" "This single human," I replied firmly, "saved my life twice, neutralized 15 armed combatants alongside me, and disabled a weapon that threatened both our species, all while being 1/5 my size and possessing not a single natural defensive adaptation." Nora remained perfectly still under the council's scrutiny, but I caught the slight upward curve of her lips, that human expression that managed to convey both amusement and pride simultaneously. "I have learned," I said, lowering my voice to emphasize the gravity of my next words, "that true strength isn't measured in physical power or technological superiority. The humans possess something far more valuable, a capacity for connection that transcends biological differences." The chamber fell silent. Even I was somewhat surprised by my own words. When had I, Commander Krell, become so philosophical? After a long pause, Vorkath rose to his full height. "If Lieutenant Rodriguez has managed to change the perspective of our most stubborn commander," he said, with what might have been amusement in his ancient voice, "perhaps there is merit to your assessment." The formal alliance was ratified that day. As we left the chamber, Nora nudged me with her elbow, a human gesture I'd grown oddly accustomed to. "Not bad for an 8-foot alien with anger management issues," she whispered. "Not bad for a tiny human with a death wish," I countered. She laughed, and strangely, so did I, a sound that once would have terrified nearby humans but now just made Nora smile wider. "You know," I added as we boarded the shuttle back to Earth, "my first impression of humans hasn't entirely changed." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You're still absurdly fragile, bizarrely emotional, and inexplicably obsessed with consuming liquids that should only be used for external cooling." "But," she prompted that I looked down at my unlikely friend and battle partner. "But sometimes, the most improbable alliances turn out to be the strongest."